Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's time again for grammar. Previously, we discussed about the errors in using modifiers, and these errors would surely affect the meaning of the sentence. And today, we're going to discuss what are these errors in using modifiers that we need to avoid, and how can we correct them. Let's find out. The first type of error in using modifier is what we call misplaced modifier. When we say misplaced, it means words, phrases, or clauses that are improperly separated from the word or clause they modify or describe. Because of this separation, sentences would often sound awkward, ridiculous, or confusing. And therefore, we need to study and make sure the modifier is placed beside the word they modify. Now look at these examples. The placement of modifiers can change the meaning of sentences. First sentence, only you can make my life worthwhile. It means no one else but you. Next is, you can only make my life worthwhile. This time, only is an adverb modifying the verb make, that you cannot do anything but make my life worthwhile. Number 3, you can make my only life. This time, only becomes an adjective modifying the noun life, meaning the only life, one life that I have. You see, the placement, the position of adjectives or adverbs can mean another thing. The placement of modifiers can change the meaning of sentences, as we have just said. Example, you have here, Charlie ate almost the entire cake. We have here almost referring to the word entire. Almost here becomes an adverb that describes the word entire, which is an adjective. Now here, almost meaning you mostly eaten the whole cake. Another one, Charlie almost ate the entire cake, would mean that Charlie was about to eat the entire cake, but the eating does not or did not happen yet. Now, when we say misplaced modifiers, it can refer to single word modifier, phrase modifier, or clause modifier. Now, let us identify the word modifier. On her way home, Jane found a goldman's watch. We have here the word gold being placed beside the word possessive noun man's, which means that it was the man who is covered in gold, probably. So that we are describing here that a man is made of gold. On her way home, Jane found a man's gold watch. For number 2, we have here gold is placed before the noun watch. Gold here would refer to the watch, which means that the watch is made of gold. Another one, confused, the teacher was asked by the student. Or the teacher was asked by the confused student. Now, sentence number 1, confused, it was the teacher. Since it is placed before the subject teacher, this would mean that the teacher was the one who was confused. And then second sentence, or number 2, we have here confused is placed before the noun student, which would mean that the one confused was actually the student. So here, if you have placed the word modifier beside the wrong noun, it would surely mean another meaning. For first example, we have here, if you try to analyze, the correct sentence here should be number 2. It would mean that we are referring to the watch made of gold. For number 2, if we try to analyze, sentence number 2 is the correct one. It was the student who was confused. That's why he asked a question to the teacher. Let's give some more examples. This time, how about phrase modifier? First sentence, the dealer sold the car to the buyer with leather seats. If you try to analyze, it is placed beside the word buyer, which means that it was the buyer who was covered with leather. But that is not the case. So this could simply mean that this prepositional phrase functioning as an adjective is misplaced. So how can we correct that? The dealer sold the car with leather seats to the buyer. So we transfer this prepositional phrase beside the word it modifies. The modifier should be placed beside the word it modifies to refrain from confusion. Another sentence. Earlier, I saw a limping dog on the way to school. The word modify here is a dog. Now, if you try to analyze, the dog is on its way to school. Do you think the dog can do that, going to school? But actually, that is not what you meant. What you're trying to say is this. On the way to school earlier, I saw a limping dog. If we try to analyze, on the way to school is modifying the subject I. It is you, or it is I, who was going to the school, or on my way to school, not the dog. So that is how we're going to revise the sentence. So when we revise misplaced modifier, all you need to do is make sure to place it or position it beside the word it modifies. This can also happen in clause modifier. Clause modifier can also be misplaced and the meaning would surely change. Example, the waiter served a dinner roll to the woman that was well buttered. If you place that was well buttered as your clause modifier, an adjective clause, it would mean that it was the woman who was covered with butter, which is confusing, right? So the meaning has changed. So how can we correct this misplaced modifier? It should be placed or should be transferred beside the word it modifies. Therefore, it would be this way. The waiter served a dinner roll that was well buttered to the woman. This time, it is clear. Next sentence. Mr. Santos, who brings nothing but trouble, waited for the lazy student. Here, it's the other way around. It was not Mr. Santos as the teacher who brings nothing but trouble, but actually the student. Here, this is also misplaced. So how can we correct it? It should be placed beside the word it modifies, which is student. Mr. Santos waited for the lazy student who brings nothing but trouble. Now, let's do series of exercises. Revise the following sentences with misplaced modifiers. First, spot the modifier and then make sure to correct or revise the sentence. You can get your paper and pencil and let's try answering this. First sentence, the porcelain doll belongs to my sister whose head is missing. Number 2, I boarded a train in Manila that was heading south. Number 1, can you tell me the modifier here? What type of modifier can you see on the first sentence? How about on the second sentence? Well, you must learn to spot first the modifier so you will know whether it is misplaced or not. Okay, let us answer this one. Let's start with number 1. Whose head the porcelain doll belongs to my sister whose head is missing is your sentence. Whose head is missing is actually your clause modifier. Whose head is missing shouldn't be placed beside the word sister, but rather it should be placed beside the word doll. So that's how you correct it. Sentence number 2. Can you tell me the modifier here? It could be a clause, a word, or a phrase. Yes, you have here that was heading south. It shouldn't be placed beside the word Manila. It wasn't Manila that was heading south, but actually it was the train. So therefore, that is the revised sentence. How about number 3? I adopted an abusive cat from our neighbor. Some professors who teach still get good ratings and students rarely evaluation. Let's deal with number 3. Can you tell me the modifier in this sentence? Well, you are correct. The modifier here is abusive. Now, I adopted a cat from our abusive neighbor.